It's crazy. That's such a great song. Not that any of you sang it, and that it was a one-hit wonder. Don't panic. I'm not going to ask you to sing it again like I did the first Sunday of this series. My name is Andrea Smith. You can have a seat. Have the privilege of being the pastor here, and we are grateful that you chose to be here with us this morning. If you are worshiping with us from Amped Camp and you're a parent of one of the Amped Camp kids, we're really grateful that your kids participate in our Amped ministry, and we're grateful that you stuck around and checked out worship. For those of you who are worshiping with us online this morning, a huge welcome to you, and we would love for you to let us know that you're here. You can do so by scanning the QR code that's on the screen. You can type it in the chat room and say, hey, I'm new here today, and then our staff will follow up with you. Or you can, if you're here in person, visit our VIP tent out front and let us know that you're here. We have a free gift that we would like to give to you, and then you can choose whether you hear from us again or not. I do want to make you aware of one very important thing that is happening next Sunday. So Amped Camp will be going on here like normal, but we will be heading to Old Fort. It is the Sunday before the Back to School Bash that we will be having up there on August the 19th. And it is tradition for us the Sunday before a Back to School Bash that we don't have worship here, that our act of worship is to unload all the school supplies, all the shoes, all the books, all the gently used clothes, all the water, all those things to get ready for and set up the space for the Back to School Bash. The good news is Old Fort already has the pod up there waiting on us to unload. The other good news is if you're thinking, I just did this a few weeks ago, my back still hurts from loading all that stuff and unloading all that stuff. The Old Fort Bash is like a third of the size of the bash that we have here in Mooresville that we make happen with other churches and businesses in the community. So the workload is greatly reduced, but it is still there. And we need you. I mean, else the team leaders are going to just be up there probably in hotels, for the week. Exaggeration, but really, we do need you up there at Old Fort next Sunday. It is a little bit of a drive. It's an hour and a half. We'll start at 10 a.m. So if you leave here at 9 or 8:30, you'll be able to get there in time. But you're really making a difference. And that's why we exist here at West. It's why we don't have a big fancy building, because we pour our resources. We have a great relationship with the high school. We pour our resources into making a difference in the community and in the world. And so when the hurricane happened almost a year ago and wiped out the town of Old Fort, we had an amazing connection. Josh's mom actually works at a school that the Old Fort school moved into so that they could have school, because their school was completely it was flooded. Parts of it had to be gutted, and they did not get back in their school. They will be going back when school starts, and we get to help them make that possible. We get to help them start off the school year with new school supplies and backpacks and tennis shoes. Not tennis shoes, summer sandals, but anyway, they are really looking forward to it, and so are we. It is a privilege that we can have this relationship with Old Fort and make this happen, but we need you. So if you're still tired from the bash here, I'm sorry, but this will be the last, I promise, big thing we ask you to do, at least for a week. And so I invite you to go to Old Fort with us. If you can't make it on Sunday, I understand. If you need transportation, network amongst yourselves. We don't have the bandwidth to try to work that out, but next Sunday, and then on that Saturday, we have a Sign Up Genius. We send it out Friday. We have the website up for you to volunteer, but we really need to know if you're going. So tomorrow, or this afternoon, you're going to get a text from the church number, which is different than mine, the church number, and we need you to reply. We'll even forego the sign up if you'll just reply to the text. Let us know that you're going to be there next Sunday for the No Huddles Day. And then we're also going to put the link for the website, and you can sign up to serve at the bash. We do need you to sign up there. So if that's confusing as mud, talk to me after the service and I'll clear it up for you. But the bottom line is we're really praying for an amazing event at Old Fort, and we would like for you to be a part. Now, we are in the middle of our summer message series called One one-hit wonders. The Drift Away song is and was a one-hit wonder. And so we're doing a little healthy competition. At the end of this month, we're going to have a drawing for some Beats headphones, and you get to guess what the song and the artist is, and then as many times as you guess and get it right, we're putting your name and we're going to have a drawing. The phone number that you see on the screen right now, that's my work number. That's the number that you need to text. And you can put it all in one text, or you can wait. I'm working on, putting your names in. So it's every vote that you enter. You don't have to send like 3 or 4 different texts. But guess the songs. The team's going to do another song in just a second. And then after that, there's going to be a video that plays. Those are your one-hit wonders that we want you to vote on. If you recognize it, guess the song, and you get double points if you guess the artist. We're really glad that you're here. Today we're going to talk about hide and seek and what you find or what maybe you don't find. So I'm really glad you're here. So when I was born, my mom was 40 years old, and she had a C-section and developed a staph infection from that C-section. For the first year of my life, she was in Duke Hospital and ended up having her aortic valve, which this was a really big deal, back in 1970, replaced with a pig's aorta. So for the first year of my life, my grandparents and my great aunts and uncles, they all kept me. And so when my mom got home and was healthy, I, as you can imagine, as an infant growing into a toddler and a preschooler, was totally attached to my mom. She was my person. And apparently, I lacked socialization skills. And so my family decided that I needed, at 4 years old, right before school was going to start, that last year before I turned 5, that I needed to go to preschool. Now, I'd never been away from my mother. And so going to preschool was a really big deal. I was scared. I didn't know what to expect. And honestly, this is one of my very early childhood memories. I went to preschool. It was at the Presbyterian Church in downtown Roxborough, North Carolina, and I met some really cool friends. And you can imagine being an only child and being surrounded with other people my age. I have this tendency to attach myself to people. And so I had this little friend group, and if they said do it, I'm going to let you know I was all over it. One day in preschool, this little boy named Philip said, "Hey, today during snack time, we should sneak out of the room and we should go play hide and seek." I thought it was a brilliant idea. And so imagine 4 years old with your little buddies running through this cavernous, traditional, big steeple, stained glass church and finding the best place to hide. Now, we, of course, did not notify anyone else that we were going to be playing this game. And so we hid in the best place possible, the baptismal font. Actually, it was Presbyterian Church, and it had this huge baptismal pool. Like, I wish I'd pulled up a picture. It was like up behind the chancel area. These are all big churchy words we don't use here. And this thing called a pulpit. It's like this lectern kind of thing, or like a podium, and then there's this big place up behind that you fill with water when you have baptisms. And so we hid in the baptismal pool. Now, apparently, our preschool teachers discovered that 4 to 5 of their little children had wandered off. And so we had been up there, and we could hear their voices, and they were calling us by name. And I looked at Philip like I didn't know what to do. I was certainly not a leader at that point, and I'm like, "Shouldn't we go?" And he's like, no, be quiet. And so they came up, they looked around, but we were tiny and we were in the very bottom. They didn't see us, and they went away. A long time passed, and they finally came back, and they found us. Now, when we went downstairs, all of said parents were in the preschool room, sitting around a little table, waiting on our arrival. My parents had the philosophy that if you got in trouble at school, guess what happened when you got home? I remember that afternoon, they were like, we're so disappointed in you. Why did you not go when they were called? We understand you didn't know better, but when you heard someone calling your name, why didn't you answer? That is so similar to the story that we are going to look at today that is a one-hit wonder. The series is about taking people and instances that are in Scripture, and they only appear once, but their appearance is memorable. And so this morning, I want to share with you this story. It's about a guy named Cleopas, and really, he's only in there one time, but what he does is so tangible. You may have heard this passage called the road to Emmaus, where after Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection, the disciples are walking on this road, and then some really cool stuff happens. This is the same day that the women had discovered that the crucified Christ was resurrected. It's taken from Luke chapter 24. That same day, two of them, meaning the disciples, were walking to the village Emmaus, about 7 miles out of Jerusalem. They were deep in conversation, going over all the things that had happened, and in the middle of their talk and questions, Jesus came up and walked along with them, but they were not able to recognize who he was. He asked, "What's this you're discussing so intently as you walk along?" They just stood there long-faced, like they'd lost their best friend. And then one of them, his name was Cleopas, said, "Are you the only one in Jerusalem who hasn't heard what's happened during the last few days?" And he said, "What has happened?" They said, "The thing that's happened to Jesus the Nazarene. He was a man of God, a prophet, dynamic in work and word, blessed by both God and all the people. Then our high priest and leaders betrayed him, got him sentenced to death, and they crucified him. And we had our hopes up that he was the one about to deliver Israel. And now it's the third day since it's happened, and we're really confused because some of our women have completely confused us." Ever felt like that? "Early this morning, they were at the tomb, and they couldn't find his body. They came back with a story that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Some of our friends went off from the tomb, to check and found it empty, just as the women said, but they didn't see Jesus. So then he," and this is Jesus, "said to them, 'You're so thick-headed, and you're so slow-hearted. Why can't you simply believe all that the prophets have said? Don't you see that these things had to happen, that the Messiah had to suffer, only then to enter into his glory?' And then he started at the beginning with the book of Moses, which would be Exodus, and went on through all the prophets, pointing out everything in the scriptures that referred to him. They came to the edge of the village where they were headed. He acted as if he were going on, but they pressed him. 'Hey, stay and have supper with us. It's nearly evening. The day is done.' And so he went in with them." So they're walking. They're sad. They're devastated. They're not just sad. That's the understatement of the year. They're devastated because their Messiah, the one that they worshiped and revered as the king, who was going to come in and make everything right. And they'd been seeing him do it, right? Like they'd watched him heal. They'd watched the miracles. They'd been on the hillside where, just a few loaves of fish and bread, or few fish and loaves of bread multiplied and fed the thousands. Those who couldn't walk, walked again. Those who had been lepers were healed. And it's interesting, the words that Cleopas utters. We had hoped. Have you ever said that? We had hoped. Or even more personal, well, I had hoped. Said it to others. Said it to yourself. Even said it to God. I'd hoped. I'd hoped. So here's Cleopas, and he's just smothered in his grief. And Jesus shows up, but he can't see. Depending on which interpretation of Scripture that you read, like this morning I read from the Message, which is a modern day interpretation. But like if you read from the NRSV, the New Revised Standard Version, or the NIV, the New International Version, or the King James Version, whichever version you read, that sentence that talks about their inability to see references that it had not yet been revealed to them. Regardless, they couldn't notice. I had a meeting this week, and I'll talk about it a little later in the message, but I had a meeting. We were talking about going to Uganda in March. We're going to take the first trip that we've had open to the masses in a long time since COVID. And we're going to go visit Acres of Hope. They've been our partner for 13, 14 years. And what started out as a vision is now reality. And the kids that were tiny when we first started, they've grown up. Like the young lady that I sponsor, Daphne, she's going to university now. As I was talking with Lance and Joycelyn and Sandy, who are going to be leading this team, we were talking about the fact that the kids that we've sponsored, which is like $50 to $60 a month, which pays for their school fees and their health care, a place to live, a place to sleep, and all that they need, that those fees have changed because they're going to university. And as you can imagine, that's much different than it is here, or than it is for the earlier years. And so my immediate question is, well, how are they paying for it? Like, I would love to be able to, but I can't just make that much come out of my checking account every month. I can do more and will. But like, I said, what's Jeffrey doing? And Jeffrey's answer from day one has always been, God will provide. It's Acres of Hope. And my next words were, well, hope is not a strategy. And Joycelyn laughed and said, very true. That's why we're working on it. Hope. Are you a person of hope? Or are you a person of cynicism? Are you a person of negativity and disappointment? So when something is in front of you that feels bigger than you are, what's your gut reaction? Are you like, I can do this, I can accomplish this? Or do you start with defeat before you even begin? Are you a person of hope? Well, apparently Cleopas was. Because he's got this guy walking beside him, and he thinks, like, are you clueless, dude? Like, you don't have any idea what we would be talking about? He's like, are you the only person in Jerusalem that has no idea of what has happened? We had hoped that he was going to change everything. Not everything that we walk away from is meant to be over. Think about that. Not everything that we walk away from is meant to be over. Some things are just waiting for resurrection. So I want you to focus on this scripture this morning, because every time you think of the word hope, I want you to remember this one-hit wonder. But we had hoped. We are so tempted to allow the power of disillusionment to be our guide. And when we're on our journey, if it's not going exactly the way that we want it to or we hope for, we allow that disillusionment to creep in and change our whole mantra about the situation. What I find really interesting about this story is, so Jesus, when they don't know he's Jesus, right? But when he starts to talk to them, and he's like, really? You're so clueless. You're so hard-headed. And your heart, like, it is so not zoned in to the spiritual place that it should be. The prophets, like, let me take you back to the beginning. And so he goes back, we read in Luke, he goes back to the book of Moses and starts talking to them about the promises that God always gave and that God always fulfilled, like Moses leading the people out of the people of Israel out of captivity and slavery and bondage into the promised land, which is the Holy Land. And then he walked them through, we read, all the prophets. Isaiah, Jeremiah, all those promises. He's like, did you just forget? Did you forget that these promises were there? But we had hoped. We'd hoped. And he bailed. I guarantee you, at some point in your life, you'll feel that way. You feel like you had hope. And hopefully you put that trust in God and those promises that were not ever going to be forgotten or forsaken. And then on that journey that is just not going the way that we think it should, we feel abandoned, betrayed, and forgotten. And in that disillusionment, we throw our hands up. We had hoped. He was right there. But they could not see. And what is so interesting is, like, in those prophet sayings and even in what Jesus said to them, on the third day, I will rise again. On the third day, you'll be able to have some hope. And did you notice, like, when they started their journey on the road to Emmaus, it says at the beginning of the passage, on the third day. And at the end of the passage, they're getting ready to eat dinner, which infers, because they didn't get on their little, in their little electric cars and ride away, they walked. So it took a while. So they left in the morning. The prophecy said on the third day, they gave up. They gave up before it was even time. Now, I could understand a little more if it was like day 4. Actually, I could understand a lot more, because I, like you, am tempted to give up hope when it looks like hope is not showing up. But they left early in the morning, like after they'd heard about the women and Jesus didn't appear to them. They're like, this is just crazy. I'm out of here. They didn't even wait to see if what he said was true. Where are you guilty of that in your own life? You're on that journey. And on that journey, something needs to be resurrected. But instead of looking for the resurrection, instead of looking for where God may be at work, instead of looking for the good, the cynicism, the disappointment, the sadness, the fear, the anxiety, it has taken over. I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. This is not fair. All those things. Ever said them? This is not the way my life is supposed to be. We give up hope. They didn't even wait till the end of the day to see if what he promised would come true. What promise are you missing out on in your life because you aren't willing to see? What promise are you willing to overlook because you aren't willing to see? Sometimes when we're in the middle of our stuff, the weight is too much, and we want to be set free. And freedom, it doesn't always mean leaving. Sometimes when we're in the middle of our stuff and it weighs so heavy, and we want to have hope, and we want to believe, but we don't look around to see. What if we remember that freedom doesn't always mean leaving? Years ago, there was this thing called the prosperity gospel. It's still a thing, but it was really, really popular back in the late 90s and the early 2000s. That if you just believe, it's going to happen. If you just worship and love God, then your life is going to be all okay. Jesus never says that, nor does he show it. In fact, the very one that we follow and we try to pattern our lives after, like, what happened to him? He suffered. He suffered. And so guess what? If he said, I'm going to show you the way, in showing us the way, he shows us that our journey is not always going to be cut and dried. It's not always going to be easy. There are going to be times of deep darkness and question and uncertainty and even loss of hope. When he was in the garden, he prayed, hey, if there's any way that this could not be what's going to happen, if there's any way that you could take this cup from me, I'd be all for it. How about it? But it didn't happen. But we don't see him say, well, I'd hoped, but here we are. Suffering's just part of it. It's just part of it. What have you walked away from in your life that you may need to revisit because it doesn't look the way that you thought it should? Sometimes it's just not meant to be easy. I love this other verse because it's so real. Their eyes were kept from recognizing him. I have no clue theologically how to unpack that. Like, We believe in free will, and we believe that things happen. If you look at the Greek word for recognizing, it translates as to be fully aware. And I just wonder, I don't know, but I wonder, is it written that way so that we'll get it? So that we'll get that God is always there, the promises are always there. And even if we know it, maybe we don't know it. Their eyes were kept from recognizing him. Are your eyes seeing the hope? I love that phrase, hope is not a strategy, because it infers that we need to get one. It infers that we need a strategy, that we better do something. So what if our act, what if our doing something is claiming our power to look around and to see? When I was studying for this message, I heard one pastor refer to Jesus as sneaky Jesus. And it's catchy, sneaky Jesus. I don't know that he's sneaky, but he is there. And we have to believe in some type of form, the same form that the women had seen and believed. And he starts telling them all this stuff. And he goes from the beginning to the end. It made me wonder about us. If we're on that path and we're in that disillusionment and we've lost our hope, do we even see the signs that are there? If things start happening and pulling us out of our despair, are we looking for those little things that will hopefully ultimately lead us to the big thing? Or do we just get so stuck? We'd hoped. We'd hoped. In this story, I believe that it is not the miracle that proves the resurrection. It is the presence in the mundane. And I believe that we all encounter the mundane, maybe more than we even want to. Can you find the miracle in your mundane? Can you find Jesus? Can you find the hope? We quit too quickly. And most of the time we quit when we're just so close. We quit too quickly. And we quit when we're just so close. They get to their destination for the evening. They like this random guy that's just stumbled upon them. They'd had good conversation. Invite him to stay over dinner. They were finally willing, during that dinner, to be found. Their hearts had gotten to the space that they were willing to see. And unlike that day in my preschool history, what they walked into was not a room of angry parents. They walked into what we now know of as communion and the Lord's Supper. Jesus broke bread with them. And it's in that act that they begin to see. What are you hiding from? Where have you given up hope? And then what do you do when the things push you to see? Are you willing to see, and are you willing to let that be your safe space where you can have hope and you recognize that you're home. As we go through these one-hit wonders, we've picked out like real life one-hit wonders too. In our modern day time, the biblical ones are real life, but a long time ago. I want you to take a look at this video about when people who have been hiding unintentionally from one another are found. Take a look.
Finally tonight here, America Strong, the brother and sister who passed right by each other, never knowing they were siblings. Raymond Turner works at Cook Children's Hospital in Fort Worth, Texas, in the recording studio there. Raymond has long wondered about his ancestry, his wife getting him a DNA test kit. It revealed a sister he never knew about. Her name, Christina. They found her on Facebook. She'd been adopted as a baby, and she was looking for her family too. And when Christina heard about Raymond, she realized they had probably crossed paths for years. She'd been bringing her son Bryson to Cook Children's Hospital. In fact, on his last day of treatment, they noticed the recording studio and the man inside. They had no idea his name was Raymond and that he was that little boy's uncle, Christina's brother. This is the moment Raymond and Christina meet for the first time.
How are you?
At that same hospital. Their families right there with them.
And then there's a family. How are you?
Raymond's son Isaiah making a t-shirt for his new cousin Bryson, the words cousin vibes. And right here tonight,
Hi, David.
Hi, David.
the siblings and their immediate bond.
To find Raymond has been absolutely amazing. Just being able to see him and hug him for the first time felt like home.
You can imagine the shock and awe and surprise and just the wonderful emotions of realizing that, you know, I had a sister that I didn't know about. We're just so thankful and so grateful.
Wow, all those times they passed by one another at that hospital.
Sometimes the journey is the destination. And sometimes the lessons that we need to learn so that we become a people of hope and assurance of promises that have been given, those lessons are there in the journey. The other night when I was meeting with Lance Joycelyn and Sandy and we were talking about Acres of Hope, it's been a long time since I've been. And there for a little while, like West didn't have representation on the board of directors, so we just sort of like, we kept sponsoring kids, but we didn't know the ins and outs of the ministry. And so as I was talking with Lance and Joycelyn, I'm like, so tell me, where does it stand? How's it going? You know, I know buildings have been built and the school is just taking off and the kids are doing so well and all that, but like, tell me the reach and tell me the touch, because that's the success of the ministry. Like, how many people beyond West and Williamson's Chapel and one other church are involved? And they just shook their heads. They said, right now we only have 3. And like my gut reaction was to like start a lecture, which they didn't need. It wasn't their fault. But I wanted to be like, how did we go from like 8 or 9 churches years ago that were so involved in like community fundraisers and all this kind of stuff? How did we go from that to 3? That is not hope as a strategy. But I decided in that moment that maybe my mouth should stay shut. Because my next thought was, well, what have you done? And the answer was very little, other than sponsor my kid. I want you to see Jeffrey. He's the gentleman that you see on the screen with the Africa shirt on and the red part signifying love. That's where Uganda's located in Africa. Jeffrey's always had hope. And he makes hope his strategy, and somehow it always works out. I want you to take a look at these kids. I think this was like 8, 9 years ago, and they're so happy because they have hope. Joycelyn was talking to me about the university, and like Daphne that I told you about, the child that I started sponsoring back when we went for the first time in 2011. For 14 years have sponsored her, and now she's in university. And Joycelyn's like, we need to communicate that 35 kids are in university now. And when she told me that, she wasn't just talking about the need of money. She was talking about, let's celebrate that kids just like you're looking at right now who had no hope externally, but full hope internally. They have gone from being orphaned and hungry to now they are in university. And in that moment, I looked at Joycelyn and I said, oh my gosh, we always talk about, the backpack mission and all the other missions that we do locally, like the Bash. These are tiny steps in trying to help people so that the cycle of poverty is broken. That's the goal, is not to just throw stuff at people, but to break the cycle of poverty. 35 kids that were orphaned 14, 15 years ago, going to university and studying nursing and becoming doctors and architects in Uganda, that is hope. Yeah, it's all right to clap. And it's our calling and our responsibility to make their hope a strategy so that one day they won't be saying, well, we had hoped. We had hoped. Not just Uganda, but everywhere in your life. Can you rise up out of the disillusionment? Can you look within and around and see the places that God is at work? And even in the middle of the suffering, when the journey might be the destination, can you claim, we didn't had hope, we have hope. I am hope. Will you make that your assurance today? Let us pray. Gracious God, Cleopas was a little clueless, just like we are. And he was so stuck in his sadness, he could not see. God, we're guilty of that. We're guilty of becoming our own worst critic and getting stuck in our crap. But God, you give us hope. You are our hope, and you abide within each of us so that we can be our own hope as we live into the power that you give us and the peace that surpasses all of our understanding when our journey is not going the way that we want it to. God, thank you for being a God of hope. Forgive us of the times that we forget to claim that hope and work within us so that we can be agents of change in our world. Let us be somebody else's strategy of hope. We offer our prayers to you this morning. In Christ's name, amen. I invite you to stand and sing. So a year ago, when the hurricane came in September, lots of people had hope that they would recover. And you've been such a big part of that with the meals in Avery County and Old Fort and that relationship with helping them. I hope when you get the text that hope's not a bad strategy, that you reply and you either meet me up there next Sunday or the next Saturday. And if not, you can pray for the event. Remember that hope is real, but we have to clean our eyes and look around and see where God is at work. May you go and be a people of hope.